INA troops moved to the front, and the very proud moment came when the flag of the provisional government of the Azad Hind was raised in Manipur, that is on Indian soil for the first time. A flag of free India was raised there long before 15th of August 1947. And Netaji himself went to the Andamans, and actually that the Andamans were handed over to the Azad Hind Force because the Japanese had already captured those islands. Unfortunately, at this time, the battle was being lost by Japan, and as you all know, the brutal bombing with atom bombs took place of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japan was forced to surrender. And along with Japan, the Indian National Army had to surrender also, and the troops had to retreat under the most terrible circumstances. They had no food, they were running out of ammunition, they had to come through the mud and forests. Many of them died there in the mud. They were bitten by snakes and by scorpions. The British army was chasing them, and they were also being bombed from the skies. It was a very horrible time, and the INA soldiers and the women of the Rani of Jhansi regiment, they really had to perform heroic deeds to get back from the front lines. And at that time, many of those soldiers who had been part of the British Indian Army, they were captured by the British and taken back to India to face trial. And Lakshmi was also captured, and she was kept under house arrest in first in Rangoon and then in Singapore. And it was at this time that they got the tragic news, which both Lakshmi and Prem and most of the people of the INA believed and believe till today, that Netaji died in that tragic air crash when he was leaving and he crashed over Taiwan. And this was, of course, a terrible blow to all the people who had followed him and were ready to die under his leadership. But there was a tremendous amount of disarray. They were not able to contact each other. They all had to suffer their grief. And as I said, Lakshmi was kept under house arrest in Burma and then Singapore. And the Indian Army people who were arrested by the British were brought to the Red Fort, and this is where that historic trial of Shahnawaz, Dhillon, and Sehgal took place. And as you know, the entire country was united behind them. There was no communal feeling left in the country. There was huge enthusiasm. People had come to hear about the INA for the first time. They heard about an army that had taken up arms against the British, fought the British with rifles, and this created a sensation in India. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people would come out on the streets every day to demand the release of the INA prisoners. Now, the trial, of course, was going on in the Red Fort, and the British uh, won that case. Of course, it was their court and their case, their country. So they won the case, and Sehgal and Dhillon and Shahnawaz were all sentenced to hanging. But there was such an atmosphere in the country that the British knew that if they tried to hang these people, not a single English person would be left alive in India. So then they thought of sending them to Kalapani, that means to the Andaman jail. But even that would have been resisted by the people of the country. So these three brave soldiers had to be acquitted, and when they came out of jail, they just, everywhere they went, huge crowds would collect. And actually, that was an opportunity that the leaders of the freedom movement could have made use of to try and keep the country united and take the feelings of the people forward. But unfortunately, that did not happen. But the role that the INA played in getting us our independence is now being recognized more and more. More and more historians are saying that it was because of the INA, and it is because of the support that the INA received in the whole of India, that the British realized
that they could not continue to rule India anymore and that they would have to leave. It is a tragedy that many of our leaders at that time, they were very impatient for freedom to get the posts that they were looking for. They did not have patience. Had they had patience, they could have utilized the tremendous sense of unity that the INA trial created in India to keep the country united and to avoid the miseries of partition. But unfortunately, that did not happen. And the kind of freedom that we got, the INA people at least, they were not very happy about it. They did not celebrate. Their leader was no more, and the kind of country that they had fought to free was not the country of their dreams. It had been partitioned into two pieces, and this was something very difficult for them to accept. So, these are some of my thoughts today. After that, Lakshmi and Prem Sehgal, they married and they settled down in Kanpur, and they kept out of public life because they didn't want to compromise. And Lakshmi continued with her medical work. And many years later, in 1971, when the Pakistani army uh, attacked the people of what became Bangladesh later on, and the refugee camps were set up at the border of Western East Bengal, Comrade Jyoti Basu, who was the chief minister, appealed to doctors to come and do relief work. And Lakshmi was one of the doctors who volunteered. And she was very impressed by what she saw, the dedication of the CPIM volunteers over there. And she wanted to then join the party, but she wanted to join on her own conditions. And so she met Comrade Jyoti Basu and told him, I want to join your party, but I want you to change your assessment of Subhash Chandra Bose. Yes, we can disagree with the methods he used. We know that the Japanese were allied to the fascist Germans, and therefore we can say that we can disagree on